Hi there. Welcome back to the Raven's Call. I'm Eric Wardweaver Sjerven, Goalie of the Ridgar Folk. I'd like to welcome you to the show. This is a show where I ramble on about different heathen-related subjects, just kind of whatever strikes my fancy, sets my mind on fire at the time. Big UPG warning at the beginning of the episode, like always. This is just the views of one heathen here in East Texas, one Goalie, doing what he does, and you don't have to, you can take it with a grain of salt. My videos are meant for conversation starters, sometimes to be pep talks, sometimes just to think about things from a different angle. I am by no means the end-all be-all on any subject whatsoever. I'm just a guy who's been doing it for a long time and has had a lot of experience in the heathen world and just likes to share. My friends say that I like to talk. Imagine that. A lot of people say I should have been a teacher, but anyway, it is what it is. So, without further ado, all of my contact information is down below if you guys want to interact there. I recommend checking out the Facebook group. That is where I get most of my interactions. I do get a lot of my viewer recommendations, either from there or through the email account listed below. I've also got a P.O. box if anybody wants to send anything in, just to be shown on the channel or whatever. I had a guy send me a couple of boxes of cigars a while back, which was really, really sweet. It was around Yule, and I really appreciated that. That was very kind of him. But I'm by no means e-begging for anything, trust me. I'm just saying it was neat, and I like to give him props because I appreciated it. It was sweet, especially when there was a lot of rough stuff going on, and that little act of kindness was very much appreciated. So, without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump into, a little bit further ado. You guys know that I've been off the channel now for a couple of weeks, and we're just now getting back to it. There was a lot of stuff going on. I'm not going to get into the details in the main episode because it's just going to eat up time, but I do go into some of the details on what's been going on in the post over on the cutting room floor side of things. So if you are interested, check that out. For the listeners of the podcast version, since I don't include the cutting room floor, we had the massive snows in Texas, which prevented me from being able to upload, and I also had a death in the family a couple of weeks ago that delayed things for me a bit as I needed to tend to my inner yard. And so that's it for that for now. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's subject. Now, today's subject is a write-in from a viewer that my iPad is not agreeing with me, so we're going to reload the email. So, this is a write-in from Miss Megan Artabili. I know I'm not saying that right. I apologize. I'm kind of picky about last names, but especially with mine being so weird. So, forgive me for that. All right, so she writes in and says that she's got a couple of questions that she wanted me to address and to touch on. Particularly, she was going back through my videos on the 3 Bs, the burn it, bog it, and bury it method of transitioning offerings to the divine or to whatever entity that you are sending your offering to in ritual. And so one of the things that she had come across was recommendations from some people about when they would do a food offering to the gods and goddesses or whatever, they would then eat the offering. And she was wondering if that was a normal process, if that was more of a modern thing. What was the deal? Because they would tell her back in the olden days that's how it was done, and then would go on from there. And she was wondering what my opinion on that was, and what the what my research has shown in regards to that, as well as just generally my thought process on that. And then she also wanted to know a little bit about the difference between making an offering and bloat, and whether or not those terms were interchangeable or if there was a distinct difference. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and jump into these now. Ultimately, as I set this down real quick, ultimately speaking, I'm going to tackle the making an offering and bloat thing first. Okay, when it comes to making an offering and the term bloat, I use the terms interchangeably. Specifically, I use the term bloat when I'm dealing with the gods and goddesses as a formalized ritual. You can make an offering to anyone, as far as, whether it be the spirits, the divine, ancestors, faith here, whatever it may be. You can make an offering. And bloat I use as the term of an actual formalized ritual, the ritual itself, all of the trappings that go into it. Bloat itself comes from a root word that means to sacrifice. Just like the word feigning comes from a root that means to celebrate. That is they're very, very closely tied together as far as how all of that plays in thematically behind the meanings of the words and the intentions of the ritual at play. And making an offering is actually a part of the ritual. So a lot of times I will, when we're going to do bloat in our festivals, I will say, hey, all right, we're going to go make an offering. I will use that as just kind of a catch term if I don't feel like saying bloat at the time. But ultimately speaking, if you were really to break down the semantics of everything, making an offering is part of the bloat process. Bloat being the entire ritual, and making an offering being one of the steps, because you gather the folk, you hearken to the gods and goddesses to get their attention, you make the offering, you receive the blessings from the offering, and then you close down the ritual. I mean, that's a gross oversimplification, but it's the base elements of it. I've done Bloat 101. You guys can go back and look at that if you want more detailed breakdown on all of that. But so yeah, I will frequently use making an offering and bloat interchangeably. Same thing with feigning. Realistically speaking, what I'm doing is just simplifying things for conversational purposes. But when you get down into it and the semantics of things, making an offering is one element of the bloat ritual itself. It is the ritual of sacrifice. And it is the ritual of sacrifice for exchange with the entity of power with whom you are interacting. It's an exchange of luck. It's an exchange of energies. And so that's to help kind of clear up some of the lexicon there. That's what we're going with, is that the making an offering is an element of the greater ritual, and the terms themselves refer to the ritual as a whole. But it is okay. I mean, you can call it what you want. It doesn't matter. But that is what I do. I'll frequently say we're going to make offering. I'm referring to bloat in that instance, but it is a kind of a common vernacular sort of thing. This simplification for conversation purposes, like I said. So that's that element. So let's talk about the other element of her question real quick. And this is more of a complex thing. The people that gave you the recommendation of eating the offering are both right and wrong all at the same time. Funny how that can kind of work out sometimes, isn't it? Yes, there were instances in the past where an offering was made and then they would eat the offering. It's true. But it's not that simple. There's more to it, actually. If you break down into the metaphysics and the semantics of what's going on here, what we're doing in those instances is they were doing a bloat of like a live animal sacrifice. You know, we were sacrificing cattle, oxen, something like that, to the gods and goddesses. And what they would do is they would make the offering, and then they would prepare the meat and ingest the meat. When you're dealing with things from arch-heathen times, nothing went to waste because they couldn't afford for things to go to waste. It was very much everything needed to be used in order for survival. That was the entire purpose behind the ritual, was to exchange luck with the gods so that you had that store of luck to help you survive in a harsh environment that was not conducive to survival on its own. We have to forge our way in this world and work to survive. It's not a passive thing, it's an active thing. And so in ritual, what they would do is they would sacrifice, say, the oxen. We'll use oxen for the example, but any live offering that was made would have been interchangeable in this particular instance. So they would make the sacrifice of the oxen, and they would try to do it in as humane a way as possible so as to not taint the ritual. And then they would use the blood with the bloat taint in the bowl to sprinkle the offering, the luck, onto those that are being blessed, the individuals, households, land borders, things like that. And the idea behind this was what's actually being exchanged there is the life force of the animal. It is the accumulated might and main that we have put into this animal through hard work and dedication. We are raising this animal because it's not just, you don't go out and buy an oxen and then sacrifice the oxen. Yes, that is a thing of value, but it carries more value and more weight in ritual when it is an animal that has been raised for ritual purposes. This is the ritual oxen. This is Freya's oxen that we are going to sacrifice to her at festival in order to bring about good luck and gain her blessings in the coming year. And so you would sacrifice the oxen and then butcher it out, and you would harvest the meat, And then the meat itself, in the process of the bloat, the life force of the oxen is actually what's being given. That's the energy that's being transferred. All of that energy that we've poured into it being transferred in that moment, and it is being sent. The blood becomes a conduit for exchanging the gift of the gods. The gods then bless the blood of the oxen, and that is sometimes mixed with meat, to give it that, break up the viscosity a little bit, and to allow it to be sprinkled. Sometimes it's just straight the blood. It just depended on particular tribal practices in that instance. The utilization of meat or some other cutting agent would have been simply for pragmatic purposes. The research is dodgy on that. But anyway, just from a logical standpoint, that's the way that I would see it, at least with common practice. And so in a time where live animal sacrifice was far more common, this was very commonplace. You would use, the gods would imbue the blessing of luck into the blood, and then you would use the blood to spread that blessing around. This is mirrored in modern practice where, say, if we're using mead, the mead then becomes the conduit of the blessing. We ask them to bless the mead with the luck so that we can then sprinkle the party and impart that luck upon the individuals that are gathered for the ritual. So liquid is a very effective conduit for energy, and so it is a great way to gather that luck in a centralized place and then disperse it amongst the group. Whether you're doing the bloattain, which was the most traditional, you can also, dip and smear kind of thing, and it was very, very effective. And ritualistically, then the blood that was left over is returned to the land, and so it's all kind of in the cycle of things. Extending this, the meat itself also then becomes a conduit for the luck. You ask the gods to imbue the blood, but you also ask them to imbue the meat of the animal, and then the meat is prepared as a meal, and then the group would ingest the meat in this blessed meal and would take in that luck into themselves, internalize it. And so the blessing of the gods was nourishing the tribe. See where I'm going with that? And that, in that instance, yes, the meal was eaten. That was, the offering animal was then prepared and then eaten. But the meat itself was not the sacrificial offering in the first place. It was the life force and the energies placed into it. This is breaking it down to a granular level that I'm not even sure the arch-heathens necessarily fully thought out. I don't know. But this is, from what I've read, what I've experienced, what I've seen, and from what I've researched, this is what I'm getting from it. So, yes, it is very, very much that the meat would be eaten and then ingested. To leave it to rot or to be eaten by carrion animals would have been wasteful and excessive, and the gods would not smile upon that. It completes the circle to ingest it. So it's kind of an electrical conduit kind of thing. You got to complete the circuit. And so this big circular gift and exchange of luck was the offering, the blessing, and then taking the blessing in. We put our energy out into the raising of the animal is then sacrificed, the blessing is made, we ingest. So there's an inflow and outflow of energy in exchange here with the divine. Now, let's look at modern day practices and why this doesn't necessarily translate. When you're talking about making an offering of food products like that, the preparation and energy going into making the food then becomes the offering. And to straight ingest the offering that was made in that instance, all you're doing is ingesting your own handiwork. I mean, you could ask the gods to bless a meal, which I still do, but it doesn't translate the same way. Frequently what I will do when I'm asking the gods to bless a meal is we'll do our bloat or something before a meal and then ask them, we'll make our offering and everything, and then we will ask them to bless a portion that is going to be part of the meal, but that's not the sacrificial part. We've done our sacrificial offering, and then I have another thing that I'm asking them to bless that we will include in the meal, whether it be the meat or the breads, depending on what this particular god or goddess we're dealing with or the festival at hand. It just depends. It varies in a number of ways depending on time and theme, things like that. So, in this case, we're not eating the actual offering. What we're eating is something that has been blessed after we've made the offering. And that's, again, a semantic breakdown, but I think an important one when it comes to the function of what you're doing. Because the idea is that in order for a sacrifice to be completed, you have to send whatever the offering is to the divine by means of destruction. It cannot be continued in use by humanity. And so to offer the meal and then eat the meal is like offering a blade and then continuing to use the blade. Not the same thing. Not the same thing. I can see how a group would take the idea of the live animal sacrifice and extend that to a meal. But I think, and I'm going on a limb saying this, but I think that's an under-exploration of the ideology behind what's going on there. Lack of fully understanding the metaphysics at play. And I don't think that it is an effective ritual, and it's not a practice that my tribe would engage in. I might ask the gods to bless the mead, and then when I am sprinkling the mead out, I may sprinkle some on the grill that we're going to use to cook in order to ask them to bless the meal that we would then be ingesting. This is very, very similar to, because we're not the only ones that do this particular practice. If you look at Judeo-Christians, a lot of them will pray before a meal asking their deity to bless their meal. I mean, it's the same basic premise. You're asking them to bless this so that it may nourish you, and what they don't realize is they're asking their God to grant them luck through the meal, and that the meal then becomes a conduit. It's a practice that's an old practice and still in play, but one that I don't think they fully understand what they're doing, how much they truly have in common with pagans in a lot of ways. So, when it boils down to it, we are blessing the meal for the ingestion of the blessing, the luck, to bring into ourselves and to make part of a whole. It doesn't quite translate to offering up a meal and then eating said meal. This is like, here, let me give you this thing, and then I'm going to eat it right in front of you. This is not the same thing. A lot of times with food offerings, what I will do with food offerings is I will leave it out to the Vaitir, who act as conduits for the divine. That is how the divine accept offerings on the material plane, because they don't have the same kind of physical presence. Their presence is different. Their presence is felt through the interaction with the natural world, and they are manifested in the natural world around us, and that's how we observe them. They have an influence over the spiritual realm that has an influence over the physical realm through all of that conduit. And so a lot of times what I'll do is when I make an offering to, say, if I'm going to make an offering to one of the gods and goddesses, I will prepare a meal, and then I'll set aside a plate, Okay, we'll look at husvitir. When I make an offering to my husvitir, and I create I'll set aside a plate for them, and then I will offer that to my husvitir. What I will then do is take that same offering out to my vey or some other area, and I will drop it off to be ingested by the animals, and that is how that circuit is kind of completed and how it is passed on. So these are some different avenues. Sorry, we're getting a delivery truck. That's what I'm distracted by. I'm trying to wait and see if somebody's going to grab that, or if I have to pause and run up there and handle this real quick. And it's looking like I may need to pause for a second. So, but yeah, that's how I would handle it. I would make the offering and then pass it out to the animals through that. I would give the offering to my husvitir, to any entity that I'm giving the offering to, and then I would utilize the animals and the spirits of the earth to complete that circuit. Or I would go out and bury the offering, or I would bog the offering. Any of those kind of things. It depends entirely upon what I'm doing. Like if I'm giving an offering of apples in, say, like if we're going to do Livka. At Livka, which is, we do around the time others do Ostra. If I'm doing like apples for Idun, I would give the offering to Idun, and I would do that through my well. That's how I do a lot of my modality. I would put it into the well, to pass it over to her. And then I would, upon the completion of the ritual, when I empty the well into the vey, I would leave the apples with the water and everything. As I poured the water out, I would leave the apples in the vey for the animals then to partake in, continuing that cycle of rebirth and nourishment that is so intrinsic to Adon's work. So that's kind of my approach on that one. So there's a couple of different ways that you can handle food offerings when you're dealing with them. It's really simple to deal with liquid offerings such as ale or mead, because you simply, from the horn to the bowl, bloat tane, onto the ground, etc. I mean, the circuit's easy to complete in that. But you really have to think things out on what's going on behind the scenes when you're dealing with a more material thing. Because when you burn an offering or you bury an offering that's of material nature, it's fairly simple to see what you're doing. When you're dealing with something like food, it can be a little more confusing on how you want to handle that. And these are just some of the options. This is not the only options. There are other ways that you can handle it as well. But in answering this question, I wanted to kind of give some, from my experience and the things that we've done, kind of how we've approached this in some instances. So similarly, at Leafgo, we will use eggs in offering. And a lot of times with that, I will have a ritual fire going. And I will put eggs in the fire. And the eggs will pop during ritual, which is really kind of neat, because every time I've done this and I'm doing my little talk up there as I'm leading the ritual, it's almost like the eggs will pop in punctuation to certain points that I make when I am giving my little talk. And it's really kind of cool. It's one of the ways that I know that Adon is accepting the offering, and that it is being smiled upon. Similarly, sometimes when dealing with the well, I will crack the eggs into the well and mix them with the water. And then when the water gets returned to the earth, then those nutrients from the egg will then, of course, be returned to the earth and nourish the soil, etc., etc. You get the idea. So that's kind of a breakdown on these different subjects. Hopefully I've answered your question. Please, guys, continue to write these questions in. They're very, very helpful in building show ideas. And with things being as crazy as they have been lately, I am not always where I can kind of pre-think these things out. And sometimes I'll go through and look at my email and go, okay, I'm going to do that one today. Let me come back to that and get this done and uploaded and taken care of, so that I can have something up on Wednesday for you guys. And I appreciate you guys that have shown support to me in these instances. I have missed more shows in 2021 than I have since I started the channel. It's ridiculous. 2021, it's like 2020 happened, and then 2021 was like, hold my beer. We're just getting started. Wait and see what's going to happen, because there's so much influx at the moment with my job situation, with family stuff. There's so much in flux at the moment that I never know what I'm going to have scheduling wise to film, when I'm going to be able to get in front of the camera. I used to film these things back to back and do like two videos at a time, and then I'd put them up, and then I'd set timers on them to release, so I'd never miss anything. If I had a week where I just couldn't film, I had stuff that was already queued up and ready to go, and that bought me a 2-week period of being able to find some time in there to prepare more content. And I'm not getting that opportunity at the moment. Things have been kind of woolly and weird, and I'm having to, like this one I'm filming the day before it goes up. It's Tuesday now. This is going to go up in the morning, and so I'm just having to go with what I got. So I appreciate you guys and your patience in all of this. Your support of the channel has been incredible. Hasn't seemed to hurt the subscriptions, so not that I can't keep track of my subscription count all that much. At first I kept an eye on it pretty frequently. Now I check it about once a week just to kind of see where it's at. But the big thing is that those of you that enjoy the channel continue to enjoy it, and that I continue to bring content that you find helpful, maybe conversation starters, maybe hints. I've gotten a lot of people that have written in thanking me for the channel and thanking me for the videos and my approach, and it means a lot. I read all of those guys. I don't always have time to sit down and reply to them, but they mean a lot to me, so please keep that coming in. If it means something to you, let me know. That gives me the drive to keep doing and to keep producing content. And I'm going to try, we've done a lot of like Heathenry 101 kind of stuff over the last couple of years, and I want to branch out more into some applied heathen thought in the modern world and some approaches to things. So we'll see. I've got some cool ideas. Hopefully I will have time to make those an actuality. we shall see. And please forgive me for the background noise. We've got the roll doors open, and we're right on the highway, so you can kind of hear highway noise coming through. But I got to film where I can, and this is the opportunities that I get. So thank you all. I appreciate everything. Hail to you all, and may your hearth fires burn bright. All right, let's get this let's get this shot and done. Whew. All right, grab the iPad. Email. All right, so here's the catch up on what's been going on. My wire is swinging crazily. Hang on. All right, it has been a crazy couple of weeks. I'll mention a little bit in the premise, but in the intro to the video, but we'll go ahead and talk about it here some in the after the cutting room floor stuff. Yeah, it's been a rough couple of weeks. For those that have been following the Facebook group and know what's up, we had a death in the family a couple of weeks ago. My grandmother passed, and it was particularly rough. She was a big part of my life growing up, and still was. And she hasn't been great for the past couple of years, but this was, and it's due to illness, and it was just not. It wasn't good. So that took me a little bit to get through, as you guys will understand, and I appreciate everybody that reached out on the page. I really appreciate that. It meant a lot as I was going through there that people were thinking about me and giving their condolences. It was rough for the whole family. It still is, but got to keep going. So anyway, after that, the snows hit, and for those that have been following the news, Texas got hit by record-breaking snow. In all my years, I've never seen it like this. We just were not prepared. We got the Thursday before, we got some freezing rain that really cooled the ground down and coated a lot of things in ice. And then we had a couple of days. It was a little bit more on Friday, but not much. And then Saturday was pretty clear, so we did a lot of stocking up and preparing. And then Sunday hit, and Sunday night the snows fell, and we got about 8 inches out there where I live, which I've never seen 8 inches of snow in my life. Even in our big blizzards, quote unquote, we get like 6 inches, and that happens once every 10 years or so. And this one was unprecedented. 8 inches overnight, and it stayed below freezing for almost an entire week. We got the snows, the 8 inches on Sunday night, and then again on Tuesday or Wednesday, we got another like 3 inches of sleet and snow, which just packed down the ice on top of that snow layer. And I've got pictures and everything from my grounds out there, my house, and the property just coated in snow. Me well up on my boots. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was beautiful. It was incredible. But there were a lot of people that lost power. A lot of people lost water. We managed to keep power the whole way through, but we had the generator ready just in case, and we were packed and ready and prepared. Then we lost water towards the end of the week for about a day and a half. That wasn't too bad. We're still under a boil water advisory now. You would never know that a week ago today we were under 8 inches of snow, because it's like 70 degrees outside, the sun's shining, there's nothing left, it's just beautiful. And you roll through and you'll see one patch of snow that just hasn't melted from when they took the road graders out to scrape the highways and the roads and stuff. We do not have snowplows in Texas. That's not a thing. We just don't have that. It's not something that we're prepared for. We get ready for ice a couple times a year, and that's usually our norm. So we've got salt, it's not even really salt, it's a weird kind of salt gravel mix thing that they use from the highway department that helps to break down ice on busy roads and add traction. And it's really helpful, it's really effective for the kind of ice that we get, but it's not really cost efficient to stock a whole bunch of that up when you may get it once or twice a year, if that. And so we just did not have enough supplies for this. It's not something that Texas gets. It's very unusual, very wild. And so the whole state was pretty much shut down, except for essentials for about a week. It was crazy. We went out there and, I stood on our road and just up and down. There's no tracks, no nothing, solid inch and a half of packed, because people would still drive on it, about an inch and a half of ice and snow just packed into this slick surface that just wasn't passable. It was ridiculous. So with all of that, we persevered. We were fine. We stocked up. So we had food, we had water preparations, we had all that. We just couldn't go anywhere, which was fine. We had it managed, and everything was okay for the most part. So we survived it, and we're here on the other side. There's a lot of people that did not have it as lucky as we did, and I really felt for them. We tried to help out where we could. Water conservation was a huge thing. Power conservation was a huge thing. The plants just couldn't keep up, and a lot of the water was water mains breaking, pumps freezing up, things like that. And heating of houses was a big thing, because a lot of people don't realize, if you'll ever look at your house, there's usually, especially if you get like a manufactured home, you'll see there is a grating sheet posted up somewhere in the house that has the different regions and the insulation for those regions. Because down south, we're more designed towards heat, so our insulation is more designed to keep heat out and cold in, kind of thing. Because we're mostly focused on cooling houses as opposed to heating houses. So we're just not built for that, literally. And the end result is that it takes more to heat the houses. And we did a lot on ours by keeping the fireplace going, and then keeping the animals and us all in one room. And it's the same room that has the thermostat in it, so it would keep the heater from coming on quite as much. Reduced power heavily, and then we just reduced our consumption on everything else to help kind of even things out. Same thing with water. We just kind of downplayed our water use. So all in all, not a bad deal. It was weird. It was crazy. We used a lot of those survival skills that we've trained up on. A lot of my old Boy Scout training came in handy in a lot of things. And we just kept trucking. And so we're here today. So anyway, that's kind of an update on what's been going on over the last couple of weeks. D&D's rocking along. Had a good session with the group not too long ago. Introduced them to my first dungeon. I've got some really cool toys that I'm playing with on that. Got a subscription to Incarnate, Inkarnate. If you guys haven't checked that out, I highly recommend it. Even the free version, you can build battle maps and regional maps, world maps, all that. And it is the coolest map making tool I have played with. I know there's a lot of them out there, but this is the one that I really liked the style on and the ease of building. And I've made some really cool battle maps, and I'm just learning. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm looking forward to figuring out and getting even better at this. And I find myself just toying with it for hours, building maps and placing stuff and just having fun with it. It's a fun thing to play with. And then I played with Owlbear Rodeo, which is a cool web-based service that lets you project your battle map and then move tokens and things around the battle map, control your fog of war. So you can I like to throw my maps up on the screen so that my players can see it on the big screen behind me when I'm DMing. And then I'll also have a grid out with the miniatures and stuff on them. I've got a larger group. There's like, if I can get that last player in there, there'll be 8 total in our party. And it's a lot of people in a party. It's a big, big party. And it can be difficult to manage, especially pacing-wise, if you don't keep things going right. And so with a group like that, we don't gather around a table. We gather around the living room. And I project the maps up on the screen, and then I'll let people come up and manipulate their minis and stuff on the little map. And that works out pretty well. And with this new Owlbear Radio, they'll be able to see the positioning of their tokens for their minis on the big map, and still be able to come up and play with the miniatures if they'd rather do that. It just gives them some options and things like that. Great thing about Owlbear being a web-based thing and free is that once I host it from my browser, they can pull it up on their own devices. So if they want the map on their phone or on a tablet, they can pull it up and look at that, and they can actually move their token on the map from their own device and not have to, just tell me to move it. They can show me where they want to go. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty neat. I like it. It's a lot of fun. So highly recommend checking out those services. There's a lot like that, but these are just the ones that I prefer. We'll see how Owlbear does once I actually use it in an actual session. The only drawback to it is that it is being web-based. It requires a good internet connection, and my internet's kind of dodgy out there, and I already use D&D Beyond to track my initiative counters and my health bars and stuff like that. So we'll see. Once I get everything going in a session, I'll give a review afterwards and let you guys know where that is. So that's kind of that for the update. Let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. And I'm going to pull up my email so that I have it here and ready to go. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So we're live in 3, 2, 1. Let's jam.